Hi, I think this is working. Hello, hello, 1 2 1 2. This is the. I don't know whether the term is io.js or node.js at this point, but this is one of those two, and possibly the same thing at this point. Hardware initial meeting. If anyone is watching this, I'm sorry if it seems all crazy. I've never done this before, so I'm going to jump in and run with it. What we have is the hardware website, which is now github.com/node.js/hardware. The issues in there list out any of the sort of thought processes or issues, as well as also hoping to define out the scope of the working group and the various different items that are involved in running hardware or bringing hardware involved into Node.js, io.js at this point, Node.js again, and then trying to find the right both minimum balance of things that need to happen, as well as also the long-term engagement and involvement of hardware into Node.io node pieces. So there's that. I put in the GitHub ticket, if anyone's watching, a link. Oh, Donovan Buck's now watching. This is scary. Donovan, can you hear me? Nah, maybe this works. Who knows? Oh, good.
I hear you just fine, but the link is different from the Hangout, so I'm not sure who else is in here.
It's just you and I right now.
Okay.
I posted it to the GitHub URL.
Yeah.
At the very bottom of it, there's the one that's the watching, and I think the one that I just put in there is
yeah,
the
that's what I just clicked on to get here.
Okay, cool. So maybe people will click on this and get here.
I'll message a couple people and let them know.
Okay.
In fact, people are messaging me. All right,
Success.
I'll take care of that.
I'm going to try to see if I can post it onto the website.
Also, I think a few people are on Gitter, so I'll let them know there.
There you go. I'm going to wait in case anyone else wants to join on and listen. Oh, there's Louis Montez and Brian. Hey, Brian. Hey, Louis. How's it going? Good.
Feel pretty good to get to the gym, though?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey.
Somebody at like a coffee shop? Oh, somebody was at a coffee shop. Here, I'm going to just post this here. Say something. Or I'm not going to paste that link. All right, who cares? All right, so we're going to go ahead and start this, I guess. As people come in, we'll add things. Right now, for the first one, we don't have particularly a strong agenda. I think this is, if I'm understanding how this thing works, and it's the first one. So we should have an agenda. I'm Chris Williams, in case anyone doesn't know who that is. Why don't we go around, and whoever's in the talking space, introduce yourself real quick. Chris Williams, Voodoo Tiki God.
I'll go Donovan Buck, DTEX. I'm a Johnny 5 contributor.
And is that us.pwc?
This is David Rezegi on Twitter and GitHub, also Johnny 5 contributor.
I guess I can go. Cassandra Perch, node botanist, and I build wearable robots.
Okay, I'll go. Louis Montez, co-founder of IceDev. I do some robotics, some IoT, that sort of thing.
Brian, you're the last one. Brian, the microphone doesn't appear to be working.
Okay.
Hardware, it's a thing.
Just a quick note out here.
Brian's on here too, Brian Hughes. So, this is, I guess, our working group. Hooray! There's also quite a few people who had registered in the GitHub issue tracker. So that's a thing, and I think people will go in and out throughout the rest of it. Inside the ticket for the original agenda, there's a couple discussion items. If anyone has anything else that they want to add in, please let's go for it. Emily Rose posted a sort of an initial agenda and scope, a few things to propose: the possibility of making Serial a first-class citizen in core, or other words, quote-unquote, bless Node serial port, compiling materials, resources around the use of Node and hardware for Node School, Node bots, and other similar sorts of things, and then develop, maintain toolchain support for building and running Node on various embedded systems. I don't know how these things work, so why don't we just tackle the first one and discuss the possibility of making Serial a first-class citizen in core.
I think you had proposed that the scope be limited to just the SOC implementation.
So I'd thrown out there that bringing all of Serial in as a first-class citizen, well, I mean, I'd love to not have to maintain Node serial port at all. That'd be fantastic. That would save a lot of gray hairs from my head. My worry would be that it over commits what should be, in my mind at least as an understanding, a small surface area of implementation, that Node or io or back to Node should be doing a few things very well, and not all things to all people, but afford the ability to do those other things if need be. And so that's where like the FFI works well for the current serial port implementation. That said, if we want to provide what I'd call the bare minimum to afford Serial to work up, it's basically exposing the SOC option. So I don't know how many of you actually look in the serial port library itself. Most of it's in C++, because it's got to go in and it's got to change the file descriptor attributes, add the Termios connections, and all those other wonderful things that should be pushed down. If we're looking at doing this, it should be pushed down in a manner that allows anyone to use it, not just for like serial port, but also potentially like paraport connections and stuff of that nature. If you look at it like that, the write queue, the write handlers, the read handlers all just follow naturally. So if we can modify or push to have the SOC options opened up in the TTY library, or even just the raw file read library, we'd actually be able to leverage all the rest of it through that workflow. Now, we do have a couple things where we do the polar pool and all those sorts of things. Those should be able to map out nicely. If you take a look at, here, I'll dump this in the link. Brian, you sent me a question. Can you hear me? No, I cannot hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, switching browser is a wonderful thing.
If you look at serialport.cpp, line 89, essentially, that section is where you're opening up the serial port and then you're setting all the different socket options that are enabled inside the system. And this is everything from setting the baud rate to setting the data bits, the buffer size, the parity, stop bits, RTAS, CTS, which we'll come back to later, X on, X off, X any, basically all the things you need to do serial port. Those could be put down into the lower levels of what would actually be libuv and then exposed up through node.io, such that you'd be able to pass a object or option set into the creator or instantiator and then have those set. If we could get that into libuv, then we don't necessarily have to have serial in libuv, but serial becomes JavaScript only, which I contend is probably the better target for this rather than having a dedicated serial operator, unless that's my contention. So opening up the floor for discussion.
So regarding the gray hairs you're getting from Node serial port right now, would doing that remove the challenge of having to have a build step when you're installing Node serial port, which that seems to be what most of the issues are. I don't know about most, but a lot.
I'd say that's about 50% of the issues with Node serial port. The other 50% are just not understanding like a reader and the processor. Like, hey, I'm using raw. Why is it not breaking on line breaks? Which is okay. I mean, that's serial port's a unique thing like this. Most of them are, I can't get this to compile. That's due to the fact that they don't have Visual Studio if they're on Mac, although we've solved that with the precompile. The precompile doesn't always work. It's its own nasty disaster. Yes, I think, Donovan, the answer to your question is probably yes. Most of the heartache or pain that people go through is just getting the binary module installed.
Okay.
And I've seen really similar things with Raspberry IO as well, which even though it's not using Promoter or serial port at all, it still has to call it to C++ for a few other things. Just because for some reason the Raspbian OS people decided not to ship a driver for PWM. The peripheral is sharing pins with audio, and they've just made the decision that PWM's not. Details don't matter, but these kind of situations come up where even for these on-board kinds of hardware things, we still need C++ access. So I think in general, we should try and find a way of just working around it for serial port first, but also for potentially other things as well. Could this maybe involve getting some sort of a Node FFI kind of thing into core even?
So that's where NAN is supposed to be that, but even with NAN, I'm constant. Every version of NAN, it's just YOLO, because the day that it drops, everybody's like, upgrade to it, and then we upgrade to it, and then the next 3 weeks I spend fixing up bugs from it. So that's, it's not a perfect abstract format yet. I think, at least from what I've heard, Rod would generally agree with that. Rod, if you're listening, jump in if you disagree. I'm not trying to be negative on NAN, I'm just saying that the problem that we have is that there's so much that needs to be compiled, and it's odd. To get a Node native module, I got to go get Python, and then I got to get a GCC compiler, and so now I need 2 other languages just to get me to my language that I want to be at. If we could move the compile pieces down, that's great for just one module. And I think, Brian, this is to what you're saying. Noble's another one that's out there that's native compile. Basically, everything in our hardware stack is all dumped into native. There's an argument to be made of doing, like I said, bring in libuv, give the sock options, and then make it so that way serial port doesn't need to be compiled. But then we leave out the GPIO pins, and we also leave out Noble, which I think if we're going to try to tackle all hardware, we should come up. That doesn't necessarily address that global space. One of the other things I think I threw in there was I've wanted, desired, pleaded for a better way of NPM to handle binary delivery systems. Right now it's a wild, wild west. You could use pre-JIP, you could maybe not. Pre-JIP sometimes works. And then if you do pre-JIP, then you got to send it out. And there was just the one that we battled with in serial port where bundle dependencies, which you need to have for pre-JIP, was not bundling dependencies, so then you got to deal with that. And ideally, the right way to do this, and I'm going to put in air quotes, my preferred way, and this actually goes to a lot of the discussion that was happening in the ticket, would be to get NPM to have a build stack, or someone provide a build stack around this that consolidates all of the build stack. Node has to be compiled for X, Y, Z, P, D, Q languages, or implementations. And serial port therefore can't, and Noble can't, and GPIO can't live beyond those implementations. If there was a way for us to use the build architectures that are already there, and infrastructures that are already there, to build these, roll them, and put them into like S3, and have NPM source those out, so you don't have to use pre-JIP. You just, maybe you use pre-JIP for that first piece, and then NPM says, oh look, I can go out and go pull it from here. That would be a better solution, because anyone in the future can just keep doing native modules the way that we already, and don't get me wrong, native modules are disgustingly horrible. Finding documentation to write them is like zero. But what little we have is already out there, so, and stabilized. So, and that goes towards, like, Louis, I think you brought up, changing any of the APIs will have negative effect. A lot of people have centered around and built around these APIs, not just even in Node. Chrome Serial is doing it. Web Serial with Microsoft and Firefox are building around the same APIs that we have there. So, but that's another option, is NPM doing more binary stuff.
That would certainly make it easier on our end. Is this something that NPM would be amenable to?
If only we had a hardware person who worked at NPM. Where is Rockbot, by the way? Not that those two are coincident or anything. I would say that, so if this is truly what we think a working group is, we could, I don't know how these things work, so I'm going to just guess, but we could write here's what we'd like to see happen, here's the reasons why, here's the benefit to the community at large, What would it take to do this, either in NPM or in others? I know that many have tried to do binary modules. In NPM, Node.js had a thing that they were doing. I think even NPM Inc. had a thing they were doing. And I don't know, I'm unsure why those didn't either take root and grow further or just disappeared. But they don't seem to be around anymore. It seems to be the predominant is Node pre-jip, and then good luck, maintainer, you got to deal with it yourself. Either everybody's frozen or no one. Someone else say something. I'm tired of talking.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Well, one possible interesting thing that I'm thinking through right now, once we go into Raspberry Pi, BeagleBone, things like that at least, do have slightly different constraints in that the architecture is always known. The only thing that changes is really the Node.js binding versions, which Stan usually handles. But I was thinking in terms of pre-build, like for Raspberry Pi BeagleBone, we only care about ARMv6 and ARMv7. So we don't necessarily need the entire span of everything out there. We certainly don't need the x86 ones. And some of the others, like Intel Edison, is only going to need x86. So maybe that is an argument for maintainers handling it on our own. But if we can get like better tooling around that, like for example, right now, pre-jip relies on us using AWS, which not all of us necessarily want to do. So maybe expanding some of those tools could also be a way forward.
I agree. There's options.
Yeah,
I think right now we're just exploring the space. So
yeah, definitely.
Something has to happen. So let's just be honest. Something has to change. Right now, it's a nightmare all the time. We could just dump Node and go to Chrome.
There is something to be said for that.
I mean, Chrome apps are pretty awesome as somebody who's done dangerous things with them. I don't think that's a legit answer for this workflow, though, even though I'm saying it.
Would we characterize a lot of the native code as mostly being just bridging between Node.js to other C++ land stuff, or would we characterize most of it as being a lot of logic that we're handling? Does that make sense? Like I know in my case, I'm mostly just bridging out to another C++ library.
Which library are you bridging out to? Termios?
Wiring Pi.
Oh, so you're bridging out to a but that's not a part of the standard lib or the ANSI packages, right?
Right. Because of funkiness with the Raspberry Pi stack.
I know that serial port, we just use the straight C++ libraries. I'm looking in Noble. Noble pulls in the Bluetooth stack libraries that are generally available. Now, it also pulls in L2cap, which is its own little beast running through the HCI things. And most of the other ones that do keyboard bindings and stuff like that, they go through the HCI connectors as well, human-computer interface connections. And those are generally speaking inside the C++ library realm. I'm trying to think if there's... I really wish there was a way in NPM to look for only native modules. That would be nice.
Once again, if we need someone, we could suggest these features to.
Oh, I'm saying it not in like a knock. I'm saying it actually because I can go then back and replay the video and write them down and send them over. So if you hear me say things like twice, it's not to harp on anything. It's because it's a mental note to go back and write this down and do some action item from it.
Gotcha.
Is there any? Actually, let me ask you all. Any other native modules that you all are using as part of this?
I think I am, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, so I'll send you a note when I get back to my computer.
I think let me expand that out actually as a action item for everyone before our next meeting, which I don't know when the next meeting is going to be. It might be at the pool side if we're all at JSConf. Let's come and assemble a list of all of the hardware-related Node modules that we all have used or use, and develop that as a list so that we actually know the workflow and the scope range of modules that fit into the hardware world. That'll also allow us to identify gaps of, like, this is just completely missing, and is available to us to do exploration and or research. I know that for a lot of native module builders, one of the hardest, and especially in the hardware realm, the hardest piece is the Windows piece, which is near impossible to write the code for. And I've, working with J Beavers and company, have been able to figure out how to crack that into a manageable solution. So we actually have good support from Microsoft to fix up hardware stuff. I'm sure you can gather from the recent announcements, they actually care to make this work. So that is a benefit to us that we're not actually taking advantage of. And like, I know for dealing with Noble pretty aggressively of late, that there's no BLE stack on Windows. It's just not there. Is that an okay action item? Everyone come back with a list of libraries that you use for hardware access and stuff of that nature?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
We probably need someone take ownership of notifying others who contribute, whether it be to Johnny 5 IO modules that use different hardware, things like that. We need to get more people than just the group that's here. We need to get their input on this.
I think this goes live like immediately after we do this, so I think that's going to be a piece, but also we should take this and send this to as many people as we possibly can to try to drum up interest for the next one.
Yeah.
I'd say not one person, but all people here and listening. If you're just listening, please also share that information as widely as you can. I'm going to create a list in Google Spreadsheet. Hopefully, if Google decides to actually cooperate. Still loading. All right, I'm going to do that later then. And then that way we can just dump into the spreadsheet, so that way we don't have duplication of effort if somebody wants to put one in and we don't have like to filter down and map names.
Yeah.
Any other topics we should discuss on that?
I guess this one's more really specific to Serial, and it's that the solution that, or at least one of the ideas that you put out, does that cover the entirety of what Serial, what Node Serial port is doing, or would there still be something left over that you have native pieces that would be required, like listing Serial, other than just establishing a connection and moving data and signaling, things like listing? Is that all covered in that? Because it just seems like if we were 99% of the way there with that library being exposed, but there was still 1% that needed a native compilation, then we're still at the same, at least from the user experience, right? For running a NodeBot stay, that if there was 1% that still needed native compilation, then we're not really any better off. Just for one of the targets, I know we're looking at a much bigger picture than that, but this seems like an immediate win that would help out anybody that's running a NodeBot stay or just wants to help people get started a little easier with an Uno or anything that's going over Serial.
I want to say there's nothing other than just the actual pool and then their factory, depending on how you refer to things, and then the actual implementation of the FD and modification of the FD. I'm going through and checking real quick.
Okay. And it probably, when we want to do things like wiring Pi and Noble, it's going to be the same question, right? Like, if we don't go 100% on the features on any one of these things, or if we don't cover it by having a hardware interface exposed through libuv, then it isn't really an improvement. I mean, it is for maintainability of the repo, but for users, it's not an improvement if we don't have 100% of the cases covered.
I agree.
Okay.
It's got to be like an all or nothing. I think part of that comes down to how we specify the integration into libuv. I've already started the process of reaching out to the main maintainer of libuv and seeing if I could grab coffee or a hangout with him and say, hey, look, this is what we'd like to do. Found out that the prime current maintainer of libuv is actually using it for PyUV, not even for Node or IO or Node. They're using it for PyUV, which is great. Like, now we can actually expose this and give you access to it in Python as well through this implementation. So if we do it at libuv and we do it correctly, it's open up to everyone that uses libuv, including like Loveit and Node and everyone else, which has an argument to do it correctly for all, and then it just benefits everybody as a thing. I think the core point is, yes, it has to be all or it's kind of pointless.
Okay.
Why does Google Sheets not work? No. Okay. Any other discussions on this topic about bringing it into a manageable and easier to handle scope, the blessing process, as it were? Compiling materials, resources, and use of Node in hardware. I think this is a great idea. I think that it's going to take a large concerted team effort to do this. That's my opinion. That it's just, at this point, it's actually a huge thing. You can traipse through the tickets on Serialport and Noble and see all the different use cases through inference, but I think it'd actually be advantageous for us to go find groups that are using it, contact them as well, and say, how are you using it, and tell me a little bit more about the story. So I wanted to open that up as a dialogue point about, has anyone started down this path?
Yeah, actually. I've been working on this project for, it's funny, I haven't really, I launched a little bit of it, but it's gotten out of hand because you're right, it's a giant team effort. I started working on something I call the NodeBots ecosystem, and basically, like, I started with categorizing kind of like species of NodeBots, whether they run JavaScript or Node natively, whether they work with Johnny 5, or things like the Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone, which I call itty-bitty computers. I've got a database now of, I think, 23 or 24 different NodeBots platforms and information on each one, like where you can buy it, where you can get documentation. And I'd be happy to help head up this effort to get all that information in one place, because I've kind of already got a structure in place, and I'd love to get some critique on it to see like what we could do to make it better, and definitely help the community get that information out there. Because, yeah, I get questions like, well, how is a BeagleBone similar to an Arduino Uno a lot? And it'd be great to have a site to point people to be like, okay, see, this is the differences, etc. So, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in helping with that.
I'll just second that. I like the idea of having that resource available. We get questions like that a lot on the Johnny 5 stuff about which one of these do I pick, or now does this talk straight to it? Do I have to leave my computer on? All those kinds of things would be great to have a resource to point to.
And I also really like the idea of categorizing different types of robot platforms as well. Not just Arduino, Raspberry Pi, things like that, but looking into rovers and things like the different types of hardware you need to solve different types of challenges, and what that looks like. How many people are using each of those? I think it'd be useful.
If you want, since we're like kind of coming up with action points for the next meeting, I can write down and kind of go through what I've got so far and bring it to the next meeting and figure out from there. Does that sound like an idea?
Cassandra, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Cool. All right, I'll do that then. I'll get to writing it up and getting everything tied up.
Okay, my fist raised in anger was because the mute-unmute thing with Hangouts.
Hey, Chris, would it make sense to post a link to that spreadsheet as an issue on the io.js hardware repo?
It would, and that said as well, Cassandra, that would also be a good, could we use the issue tracker for that as well?
Sounds perfect. As soon as I get back to a computer, I will. I'll do that.
We're just going to issue track all the things. Actually, I'm going to put that underneath the hardware inclusive.
Okay.
Does that for the spreadsheet?
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, unfortunately, I've got to go. I'm 5 minutes late for another meeting, but I'll follow along online.
Sounds great.
I'll see you poolside too.
Poolside it is.
Yep.
Which, speaking of which, is probably a good discussion to go to. I know that we scheduled this for 1 hour. We'd like to sort of, at least from what I've learned before, pick out a time that's good for the next meeting. Does anyone have an idea how frequent these working groups are supposed to meet?
I've heard that once they stabilize, they meet once a month, but we're far from stable. So I'm thinking a good idea might be once every other week or so until we kind of figure out exactly where we're going with this and get some big initiatives rolling.
So if we do that, timing is not good for me.
Right, because JSConf. We could probably have a bigger gap before the second meeting just because this kind of jumped up at us. But yeah.
Is there anyone in this group who's not going to be at JSConf? Brian, you're going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Donovan, you are too, right?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we have the lot of us, 6 of us, isn't it, meet in person, do it Thursday during the Choose Your Own Adventure, between like the 6 o'clock time frame, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time frame. And
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that works.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and also lasso some of the other people that should be there.
yeah, I figure, hey, we'll have the perfect opportunity, the boats, bots, copter, rockets, and boats, bots.
The woman who's speaking who's using a knitting machine with serial port, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah. We'll have everyone there, so let's take advantage of that and have our next meeting actually at JSConf. We'll do it the Thursday, which is a off day for me, nice relaxing day. And we'll do it like after the 6 o'clock because I think that we'll want to pull the people in who are running the events and do it in that space. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah. I also know that a group of the NodeBots Day organizers were kind of wanting to do a poolside chat as well. Maybe we could actually roll these together a bit. Maybe get even more people involved.
Agree. I would actually say that if we're going to make this a working group, we should probably merge. One of my big worries is that we have tribes, and if we're going to make this hardware a working group, we should try to merge the tribes first and foremost. That's kind of a thing of mine. Bring everyone back to the same table. We can have fiefdoms, but not tribes. Let's go with that. And ideally, bring the NodeBots Day with the NodeBots, with the boats, with everyone together working and the sewing machines too, all working in the same concerted effort, as well as also the ones that don't have fancy names and logos yet. The wearables team doing amazing things. Sarah's out there, Cassandra's here. There's such a widespread of people using hardware, node-influenced hardware, is like I think I'd call it, that we'd be remiss in leaving any of those out.
Makes sense.
Does anyone know any of the leads from Cylon.js? Yeah, I feel like we're all Johnny Five folks here.
Well, David left, but I think he's friends with one of the guys, one of the lead guys there.
I know the team there, so I can reach out to them. I don't believe they're going to be at JSConf.
Yeah, I have community issues that I'd like to sidebar about that. I mean, yeah.
I know there is some tension around Cylon.
Why don't we table this for another discussion? Maybe at a in-person discussion. But I think, Brian, what you're trying to say is make sure we have some form of inclusion of everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I agree. Yes, we should have inclusion all around. The other thing that I'd argue we got to try to figure out is people to, and maybe this is a good time. We could actually solve a lot of the compile problems if everybody had all, if either one person had all the toys, or if we could group together all of our toys and say, I've got this, I've got that, and then somebody's responsible for testing libraries on Raspberry Pi, somebody's responsible for testing on Pi 2s. If you get access to the Photon early, checking to see that that still works, the Edisons, those sorts of things. Because I don't know about you all, but it's a major financial and time investment to keep up on all the different things, which is in part the reason why I'm a voter on the, if the build infrastructure is there and we just share it or Foundation pays for it, hooray. But having individuals, I've given up. I can't keep up buying new toys because one person filed a ticket with an RS-232 connected to some machine I'll never have access to.
Yeah.
Sounds like it could be a tab on your spreadsheet, a list of who's got what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Genius. Spreadsheets are awesome. You know what? Let me change this to modules, hardware owned. Good call, Donovan. Good call. I'm going to change this from module list to worksheet. So it's just called node.js hardware.
Yeah. Quick question while you're setting that spreadsheet that I'm like kind of terrified to ask, but I've got to. Is there a code of conduct for working group meetings and or association, like at all? If not, do we need to? Should we? Oh, no. Should we is not a question. How will we do that?
I'm going to take a stab at what I think the answer is for that. Does that work, Cassandra?
Okay, that sounds great.
Hold me to it, because I'd actually probably have to ask somebody else. I'm under the belief that there's a io, which is now Node code of conduct, which funnels down to all the working groups as part of it. That might be completely wrong, but that's my understanding of how this would work. If the case ever exists that that is not true, I'd be one of the first people to help stand there and say, yes, we need to have a code of conduct as part of it. So if anyone has strong disagreements and want to talk to me about that privately, I'm happy to do that. I'm not sure you're going to change my mind, but good luck trying. Not to be dismissive, but if we can do it for JSConf, I'm pretty sure we can do it for a working group.
Cool. Just making sure to get that out early because, before, hopefully, in an ideal situation, nothing will arise that would require use of a code of conduct, but I wanted to get that out there early just in case, just to have it there.
Let me ask this a different way. Is there anyone in here who's ever been in an io.js working group? Or are we all just trying to figure out how this thing works? How about watched any of the working groups? Okay, I'll take that as a to-do for me. I'm going to go figure out this working group thing. But my belief is that the code of conduct sits at the top level, and then the rest all go down from there. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Cool.
Ryan, what's it say?
So they have io.js has a contributing code of conduct. You need to read through it to see if this applies to TCs and working groups as well. There's at least something.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we could probably file an issue on that, figuring out A, whether we have a code of conduct, and B, if we don't, getting one set up.
Do we need to get one set up, or can we just? Is there any reason not to use the ones we already have available?
Well, that's what I mean. Like by set up, I mean grab one.
I don't want to go through a reauthoring process of a code of conduct.
Oh no! I was certainly not suggesting that. I just any of the templates that are out there are fine. We can grab one and go if there doesn't already exist one. But I just figured it'd be good to have an issue there just to make sure we keep an eye on it.
I'm gonna ask it in a ticket.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm reading through this. It doesn't seem to be clear exactly if this applies to everything in the io.js umbrella or maybe just contributing on GitHub itself. So we'll want to ask for clarification on that, what it applies to.
Yep.
Thanks. Thanks for helping me out with that.
Any other questions? I think that we might not want to tackle the final item, just to leave another agenda item, which is develop, maintain toolchain support for building running Node on various embedded systems. Call me crazy, but I one think that's probably best served in person. Although Emily won't be in person, we'll see if we can get her on the Hangout, so that way we can make sure she's a part of there. I'd love to have her involved in that for many reasons. We'd also probably want a representative from Tessel who's going down that path as well.
All right, I can reach out to Tessel.
Huh?
I can reach out to Tessel. I know a lot of the folks over there.
Aren't they like right down the road from where you are?
Yeah, I'm pretty close. They're a couple train stops away.
Throw a Tessel 1 at the building and be like, hey, come on, join in. No.
All right, I'll write that down as an action item.
Okay. And then I'm looking through to see, is there any other things that anyone saw in the issue for the initial agenda that we'd want to talk about now? I do want to make note, because I know that I've seen this appear a couple of times. U underbar device underbar T does not just solve this. There's a lot of things for both serial port and for the BLE stack and all the different hardwares and different communication devices. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not going to just solve it. This is going to actually take us as a working group, concerted effort and time to get things correct all around the board.
Makes sense.
Yay! First meeting done. And reunification happened. Hooray! In case you were unawares, that's why I said Node io Node, because Node was forked to io, that then remerged in, and now it's called Node, and then the Node is no longer Node, so now it's just Node. I'm lost at this point, and
Yeah.
I'm running the moderator board. So, yeah, fun times. All right, if there's no other questions, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. Viewers, do we actually have viewers? If you have any questions, I don't know how you can actually get that to us. So, here, there's like a Q&A session. We'll hold a Q&A session now. Well, let's see if this works. This feature is disabled. Thanks, Google. That did not work. So without further ado, let's call it a day. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
All right, nice shirt.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See everyone in 2 weeks, Thursday. I believe that's May 28th.
8th.
28th at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Time. The group of us, Ryan joined. I'm not sure. Ryan, are you gonna be down in Florida with us? Maybe. Didn't hear you. Oh, and Ryan dropped. The group of us will be most likely in person together, and probably exhausted after building robots and flying things all day. So, but it'll be a good time, and floating things too, and shooting things up in the air too high.
Wearing things.
And wearing things, all the things with the other things, and that I think there's in terms of agenda items for the next one. Just to give a good overview of where we're heading. We'll reconvene, go over the old business, which is items from here. This is a proposal. This isn't an assertion. I'm just going from what I've done before with the other groups that I've been involved in. Redo a section of old business, which is to go over like the spreadsheet, figure out, welcome new people, go over the discussion points that we had from here. And then new business, which we have on the docket right now, the develop, maintain, toolchain support for building running Node. Any other items as well? One of the things that we had talked about in this, and I'm just going to throw out there for a discussion point, that we probably more than most other groups will have to identify how to work in the working group with, is the integration or influence or connectivity points between this working group and potential corporations that are utilizing the either efforts of hardware initiatives already in Node and or future efforts and initiatives in there. That's something we will probably have to rationalize because it's going to be different in that there's actual hardware and physical componentry rather than just use our stuff and maybe throw some cash this way, as might be the case for other working groups. One of the things that we have to worry about is the whole balance set. There's a lot of different companies that are using Node in the physical space that would probably want to be involved in just figuring out the right ways to make sure everyone's involved, everyone gets a say, and it's meaningful and appropriate. That's a discussion point for later, unless anybody wants to tackle it right now.
No, I think that's better served when we have a more diverse population of people ready to speak up.
Excellent. So then, thank you all very much for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks for organizing, Chris.
001,
Thanks, Chris.
001, 001, 001, 0011110.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, I thought you were telling us to hold on for a minute.
I was giving you binary goodbye. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.